everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our chat with Greg Brown, the partner of the late Priscilla Davis and the author of Texas Tragedy, The Story of Priscilla Davis, a true story of money, murder, and survival. Our conversation continues as Greg describes the trial of Priscilla's husband, Cullen.
So everybody tricky-trots to Houston for the solicitation of murder trial, and everyone knows that he's going to be found guilty because of the jury has played the videotape and everything. Well, Cullen gets on the stand, actually, at this one. And at this time, I feel he did because he had already watched the mechanics of the murder trial and watched Racehorse and everything, so they put him on the stand. And he said, I was double-crossed. An FBI agent called me and told me to play along. And the jury believed, and he was acquitted. So now everybody tricky-trots back to Fort Worth to try to get this divorce done. Now we're in April of 79. And at this time, Priscilla and Cullen have been married now, going on 11 years, 10 years, 10 and a half years.
And trying to get divorced for 5.
Yes, exactly. So she filed for divorce in 74. 2 people are dead. 2 people have been shot. And now they're going to go ahead and start this divorce like all that other stuff never happened. So the divorce was final in April of 79. And Priscilla received $6.6 million, but not all in cash. Here's how it went. Here's how it went. Remember when Chuck Woolery did Wheel of Fortune in the late 70s? And you would have this carousel going around of items you could buy, and you had to spend all your money. And if you had like $78 left over because there's nothing else, you get that in cash. So here's what happened. They did it Wheel of Fortune style. Priscilla got $6.7 million, but she had to spend $3 million of it because they said the estate only had $3.5 million to actually give her cash. So she had to use that other money to buy items because guess what? She wasn't going to get any items. She wasn't able to declare her furs, her jewelry, her sterling silver as her personal gifts or property.
So she had to buy it back from her own estate?
She had to buy back, and she used to, in those exact words, she had to buy things back from her house. Yes, nothing was considered her own gifts. And so at that UNT, the film that's been preserved, she's doing this interview, and she says, what bride or what woman doesn't get her, her gifts,
possessions,
the sterling silver, the jewelry, the gifts. So that's what had to happen. And that's in that same interview when Cullen says, well, Priscilla was like a bad hangnail. You know that it has to be ripped off.
And while he's out looking for the killer.
Yeah, exactly. So she got the $3.4 million, and she got $3 million in her jewelry and furs and possessions and what have you. And she bought a house. She had 30 days to get out of the big house, or else she was going to be fined like $5,000 a day. So she had to get out of the big house and find something to move into. And so she found a house, probably a nice house, 3,500 square feet or so, in Fort Worth. She didn't leave Fort Worth yet. And so nobody would insure her house but Barclays of London. And her brother told her that was too much. Nothing was going to happen. One evening, right before going out on the town, she was smoking a cigarette. She smoked Eves. She really didn't care about smoking, but it was still the 70s, and And she
Is that real skinny?
The real skinny ones. And she put it out in her tissue and put it in the glass waste paper basket. Well, 6 hours later, half the house burned.
Did you know about that?
No.
And so I think the address of the house was like 101 Hazelwood in Fort Worth. Anyway, So that's when she decided to cut her losses and just leave Tarrant County behind. And so in the spring of 81, she was seeing this man, Bobby Camp, that had that motorcycle. She bought him 2 motorcycles. He sold boots over at the Boot Barn or something over in Dallas. And so she moved over next door to, Too Tall Jones and everybody from the Cowboys. This was when everything north of LBJ was being built. So she bought a house in the Bentry area.
Right.
Okay. And for like $350,000, which in 81,
Huge.
Yeah. And so she bought that house. And at that time, Dee, this was 81, Dee was in and out of, she was a heroin addict by this time. And, but anyway, she didn't see Dee much, but it didn't matter. Dallas was becoming a hot spot of the new money, the opulent 80s.
The beginning of the 80s, the oil boom had come back in, and
and I thought it was like this all over the country in big
Right.
cities. The opulent 80s, everything was new and shiny and big. It was
Because Eddie Childs used to say, if you ain't got an oil, you need to get you one.
It was Robin Leach, the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
And this is when Dallas debuted.
Yes, exactly. Dallas debuted, and the mansion on Turtle Creek opened in 1979. And that's where the cast of Dallas stayed, and that's where they had their drinks every night at the mansion bar.
Larry Hagman and all the...
And Priscilla was right
amidst
in the middle of it, because she was the new face of Dallas money. She was beautiful. She was blonde. The dark days of Fort Worth were behind her. She was a millionaire. She still had her size 0, well, maybe size 1 waist now. And they just couldn't get enough of her. Sakowitz came up from Houston and built a big store on the Dallas Parkway.
That I introduced you to in New York.
Oh, oh yeah, okay, yeah. And so, Sakowitz on the Dallas Parkway. And it was just wonderful. The Galleria opened in 82.
My goodness.
Oh, I'm sorry, just leave that. Yeah.
I want to hold it. I feel like...
Well, that's yours anyway.
The Bible.
She wants us to know she's here with us.
Yes.
Yeah, she is. So anyway, she becomes the face of Dallas opulence. She buys this car called a Clenay. She buys
like an old Excalibur.
Yes,
looking,
exactly. Right. And she has a white limousine waiting for her, almost 24 hours a day. And life is good. Life is good. She teams up with Jack Wilburn, her husband, and the father of the slain little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And they do something that the Goldmans will follow along with a decade later with the OJ cases. They sue Cullen and Silvercorp for the wrongful death of Andrea. And she's not going to rest on this. She's not just having a good time in Dallas. Okay? And she's
still a mother with a broken heart.
Yes.
She's looking for justice.
She is looking for justice, and she is. And at this time, people have asked me, did Priscilla hate Cullen? She always said, I love Cullen. She always said that because she did at one time love him. She didn't have a hardened heart, but she hated what happened. And she did want him behind bars. She did want him to pay, and she was scared of him.
She needed to act fast, and she didn't realize that the market was falling underneath oil business. And it came crashing about 84.
84, 85, 86, really. But anyway, so she kept Cullen in court until around 87. And
that's when he took bankruptcy.
And in that bankruptcy, the $5 million arrangement for the wrongful death was charged off. So anyway, that was in the mid-'80s. And in the meantime, she's still spending money. That $3.4 million, her brother wrote her a letter and said, please do something with this money. Let's get it in some investment. She went to Billy Bob, and Billy Bob went to her and said, please, Priscilla, let's put this money you have in something prudent and conservative. And
not a 24-hour limousine service.
Exactly. Right. And she said, but I just bought this bed that Lincoln slept in, and I just, did this and this.
Yeah.
And so
she was a hoarder of fun stuff. Everything had a story
and every night that, in fact, the one episode of her going shopping with this entourage of these 9 men, including the boot barn boy, they go down to the precious jewel salon downtown Neiman's, and everyone, it's Oprah. You get one, and you get one, and you get one. All 10 of the men got a Piaget watch. This was 84, and there were 10,000 then.
10 years later, Anna Nicole did the same thing. Walked into Neiman's, into the precious jewels.
No.
I want that whole case.
Wow.
Okay.
I said, who pays retail for jewelry at Neiman's?
Exactly. So anyway, that happened. Little things like that, and
but it was her way of life. She didn't consider herself, I'm assuming, a character. She was
she knew she was a character.
Okay. But
she wasn't dumb. She knew that, and she used to say, I knew the media was looking at me.
But it wasn't put on. She was being her.
She was being her.
Right.
Yes.
But she knew she had a little flair for the...
Yes.
For the dramatic.
For the dramatic.
For the dramatics. Mm-hmm. She used to like to shock people sometimes or say certain things,
But she had a heart of gold. And, one of the stories, what year was it that she was dating that Bobby fellow who...
Bobby Camp, 81, 82,
so
83.
one of the... I think this is a story you talk about, that he actually had just left a former girlfriend.
That girlfriend.
Who found out she was pregnant.
Yes.
And then Priscilla is somewhere that evening, and she's actually at a bar where the former girlfriend's cousin, Joyce, was working.
Yes, that's
and
right.
she said, why don't you put me in touch with his former girlfriend named Betty?
Betty, yes.
I'm going on a girls' trip to New York. I'd like her to come along.
That's right. She took Betty up to New York, and they stayed at the Waldorf.
And she's like, why are you being so nice to me? And she said, are you pregnant with my boyfriend's child? And she's like, yeah. And she said, well, even if he has nothing that he wants to do with it, I'm going to be in his life. And this goes on even until the child was like 4 years old.
Yeah.
You talk about she hosts a birthday party for that little boy in her house.
Yeah.
So for anybody who got the wrong idea about her, she was a caring, generous, loving human being.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a testament to anybody.
Right. She struggled before, and she didn't want to see anybody else that was close to her she cared about.
Exactly.
So then she comes home, and she doesn't realize, I guess, Dee's pregnant.
Well, what happens is, one afternoon in 1984, she's there at the Bentry home, and as this person I interviewed, David, said, we're all sitting there listening to some funny story Priscilla was saying, and the phone rings, and it's Gatesville, the women's
prison in North Texas.
And Dee had been in there for something to do with drugs or something, and they said that she had just given birth to a little girl. And Priscilla's like, well, okay, I guess I'll be a mother again. So she she goes down to get the little girl in the limousine, and they come back, and it's a little biracial daughter. And Priscilla...
But she had no idea that Dee was pregnant. I mean, she was in jail, so she goes to pick up this baby.
This little baby. Yeah.
And it's no name little baby. No name.
No name. Until she names it Little Priscilla. So we have Little Priscilla Davis.
And she is an African-American baby, half.
Yes.
And I love it when the little girl comes home from school one day. And did she call Priscilla mother?
She called her Mama. And she called Dee Mama Dee.
Okay.
Now, other people called her Mama Demon, but anyway.
Well, and she came from school and said, Mama, am I black?
Mm-hmm. And Priscilla said, you can be whatever you want to be.
Right. And she got her all the writing lessons, the piano lessons, the ballet lessons.
Yes. And everything, life was good. That was 84, 85. At that same time, the brother's still writing letters saying, you got to do something about your money.
Stop spending.
Stop spending. Stop spending. You're down to your last million. And that was in 85 going into 86. And Priscilla used to say, yeah, my brother would say I'm down to my last million, but he didn't object to me buying our mother a house and spending money on her. There was a little still then.
Has anybody kept up with little Priscilla? She'd be about, what, 40 today?
Mm-hmm.
Does she still live in Texas?
From what I understand, she does. She lives over in the Tarrant County side, and from what I've heard from some distant relatives, she has 2 beautiful children, and they're probably 20. She had a baby in 2003. Dee called me. And said little Priscilla just had a baby. And I went to Neiman's and got a little solid gold David Yerman baby bracelet, and I sent that over. And then she had another baby in 05 or 06, and it was by the same person. And from what I understand, he came from a good family. His mother was a nurse. And so, anyway, I think it turned out okay.
But she seems to have had the least tragic.
Seems like the curse kind of ended.
Yes.
At least I hope so.
Hopefully.
For little Priscilla.
Yeah.
Because doing my research, Dee, the daughter of Priscilla and the mother of little Priscilla, was in a horrific car accident.
She died in a car accident in the summer of 2020. She was just turning 61. Yes.
And a truck hit her from behind and threw her 30 feet over
35 over Stemmons.
And then the son, Jack.
Well, Jack Jr., yeah, Dee called me about that. That was in December. That was in the fall of 08. Jackie was born in 61, so he was 47 years old. And he was found dead on a park bench in Arlington with a morphine and vodka. And when they found him, they didn't know who it was. And so they buried him in a pauper's grave. And so in the next spring, Dee was at an AA meeting or one of those. And somebody there said something about finding someone dead on a park bench, and all of a sudden it was put together because his name was Jack Wilburn, and so much time had passed they didn't put with the Wilburn with the Priscilla Davis.
So he was dead and buried in a pauper's grave, and
he was exhumed.
Months passed before his family even knew.
Priscilla had already passed.
Yes.
At that point,
right.
So I mean, Dee was the one with that extended heartache, and then she tragically passes in 2020 when this semi or whatever hits her.
Yeah.
And so really the only one left is little Priscilla and Cullen.
Who is me as an extended type.
Yes.
We're really the three. And little Priscilla, she was 16 turning 17 when Priscilla passed away. So she really wasn't in the picture, and Dee came and got her in 97.
It sounds like Dee had cleaned her life up.
So what happened was, in 86, 87, she was still running the streets and doing heroin and going in and out of jail and all that. Okay, that was 86, 87. Priscilla was blowing through her money, being generous to everybody and what have you, but still going through her money. So she sold the Bentry home in 86. And then she decided to have an estate sale with Garrett Galleries. And Nancy Smith and George Peppard and some of them wrote about it. And she raised $750,000 by selling her furniture. And,
Alan Peppard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Peppard. And so that was in 86, and the headlines and all the papers were, Priscilla cleans up, Priscilla earned some lunch money. She got $750,000 on, and so when she got that money, she was almost out of the other money. So she leased a unit down at the Warrington, and she stayed there until 91.
Wow.
And then she got an apartment. By then, she was down to her last, funny story, she was down to like her last $5,000, and she was at the mansion having a drink, and somebody from out of town was in town, and they're striking up a conversation, and the man says, something to the effect of, well, what would you wish for if you could have anything? And she said $10,000. The next morning, and I still have the bank draft from Republic National Bank, a $10,000 cashier check was delivered to Priscilla from this stranger.
So here she'd helped so many people, but then yet it was just random cocktail conversation that somebody ends up helping her.
Exactly. I hadn't thought of it that way. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So take us to the moment when the two of you met.
Yes.
So this was 86, 87. As I said, 91, she's running out of money, and she leases this apartment. She has little Priscilla with her. Little Priscilla's 7 years old and starting elementary school. So Priscilla says, I cannot afford a private school. I cannot afford to live in the Bentry neighborhood or Highland Park. But if I can find an apartment just inside the Highland Park School District, that's the best I can do for her. So she finds this one-bedroom apartment on the corner of Lomo Alto and Lemon behind Strictly Taboo, and across from, remember, all right there where the tollway starts? And there's an old barrack, World War II barrack style looking apartment called the Westchester. Doesn't even have a dishwasher. And she finds this one bedroom apartment for $525 a month. So she's gone from the largest house at the time in the state of Texas in 74 to not even 20 years later, the smallest one-bedroom apartment just inside Highland Park School District, so she can let her grandchild from her wayward daughter in prison have a chance at life.
Wow. What a fall.
But she didn't look at it as, yes, it's a fall. Yes, it is a fall. But she didn't mope about it. She just said, well, that's the way it is. There's one thing about Priscilla, and she used to say, I can't get a job. First of all, she didn't know. She said that she had a job at Foley's in Houston in 1956 when she was like 15 years old. And she said, it took 3 weeks for them to understand all I was doing was riding the elevators up and down. But when they did, they fired me. And so that's all she had ever done.
Yeah, what would she do?
And then she said, but basically what she said, and this is a good line, she said, who was going to hire Priscilla Davis?
Right.
And for what?
Who was going to hire Priscilla Davis? One of the most photographed women at one time that lived in the biggest house. Nobody wants to tell her what to. It's almost like she had penetrated the stratosphere of fame in such a way. It's like, what do you want more, fame or money?
Right.
Now, did Cullen ever make a comeback after his bankruptcy?
No.
Well, he didn't really have to make a comeback, because I think what people have learned, and even if years ago you looked at some of his addresses of his homes, they're in Ken Davis Trust. So things were structured.
Gotcha. But he never felt a sense of obligation or came back to help her, or nothing.
Mm-mm. And why would he?
Right.
What
you have
a
to
true
understand,
narcissist.
Yes, exactly. Yes, he had won in the game of public opinion at that
Twice.
time. Yes, court of law and public opinion to an extent.
So now that she's living in this little tiny one bedroom.
So anyway, Priscilla's living in the little tiny one bedroom with this mammoth furniture that she had brought from these various large homes. We had this great big coffee table that she, back in the 80s where everything was, an inch thick glass with a lucite bottom. Yes, we had all this. Yes. And the mirrored credenzas and all this stuff.
So how did you two meet?
Well, so I was working for Neiman Marcus in 1993. I come back from Texas Tech. I didn't know what to do. I was 23, 24 years old. So I went to work at Neiman's downtown, in the men's department. And I was there, gay, young, and I was living at home with my parents, but I was drinking a lot. And they said, well, you need to leave. I said, okay. So I moved in with this older gay man, and Ken Barden. And Ken, like a lot of people in Highland Park at that time, older. When I say old, this was the mid-90s. He was 50 years old. A lot of these 50-year-old men, they had been married. They had made a lot of money, but they were gay. And so they had divorced their wives, or the wives were, anyway, it didn't really matter, I guess, to an extent. And I don't know if that happens still today, or if it was just Dallas, or in all big cities it's like that, or just life in general. So anyway, at that time, younger gay people, because there were several, 2 or 3 different clubs, not loud music clubs with disco lights and all that, but sophisticated piano bars. The Hideaway is what one was called on Buena Vista. John L's over on Wycliffe near the tollway. And we'd be there, and we would socialize with these older men that would have parties, you know, nice parties. And so I had just moved in with Ken, not as a lover though. And he said, you need to give a dinner party, you know, to have people over. And, you know, that old world. And he was kind of a queen from the birdcage. You know, he had those green taffeta curtains and the black baby grand piano, and, you know, Jennifer Flowers, Bill Clinton's old mistress, would be there. And
singing on the bar.
Yeah.
Fabulous Baker Boy style.
And Betty Holly's old widow, Maria Elena, and some of those. You know, it was just such a fun time. And I said, okay, so I'm going to give this dinner party. And it was about 3 weeks. It was February of '95, about 3 weeks after the movie the movie came out with Heather Locklear. And Priscilla and I used to drink vodka. Well, we drank vodka every night, but we used to especially drink it and watch the movie when it would replay on Lifetime.
Now, did she like the way Heather portrayed her?
She would.
Who didn't want to be portrayed by like?
She said that. She said, you know, the only thing she said, I was more beautiful. And we would watch the movie, and she would say
she was probably a lot more humble than Heather too.
She actually was pretty humble. People don't realize that about Priscilla. She actually was.
But I felt like Heather Locklear was perfect for the role, because that was during the time of Aaron Spelling and Dallas and Dynasty. And
yes, and that was the last of the ABC or CBS Sunday Night at the Movies.
Right.
It was the ABC Sunday Night of the Movies. It was the first Sunday of February of '95.
Right.
And it was right before I met Priscilla, actually. And it was about 8:30. And I thought, where is Priscilla? Because Ken said, you need to invite Priscilla Davis. And I said, I don't know Priscilla. And he said, well, I do, of course. And I said, so anyway, he said, you know, since it was one of his closest friends. And she came over. She was late. And it was so funny. She comes in. She has this platinum hair. And she has this long, it wasn't a meat cut. It was like a long leather coat. She had this big bag with the double C's on it, this big Chanel bag. And she said, I'm so sorry, I had to stop at 7-Eleven to get some grapefruit juice. And she said, and there were like 5 or 6 people that stopped me because they wanted to talk about the movie the other night. And, you know, just one of those things. And so she came in and she took out her grapefruit juice. She sat down, and of course there's all these queens that are laughing and think it's funny. And I'm, you know, all I know is that, you know, my dinner's going to burn. And so she sits down, she has this Chanel bag. She pulls out the grapefruit juice, and then she pulls out this other plastic Gatorade bottle with the clear liquid, and says to somebody, I need a glass of ice, or maybe somebody knew already what it was. It was her vodka and her grapefruit juice. Yes. Yeah. The picnic basket, I would learn later on. So, and I was drinking, of course, heavy by that time as well. And, after everybody else left, we just stayed there and talked. And Ken Barden said, it's like y'all had a language all of your own. And I don't remember a lot about it. But the next morning...
Because it was that effortless.
I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning, Priscilla called.
Did you realize what a moment it was for you also in that moment? Like,
no, I don't remember much about it.
He's a young pup.
I don't. I was 25.
But do you remember feeling like you had this gravitational pull towards her or anything? No, or it was just a regular evening?
It was just, no, it was just a, no. I don't. Because I talked to a lot of people. Anyway, I mean, I didn't. At that moment.
Okay.
It took about a week or so.
Dallas was hopping at that time. You know, Joey's had just opened where Albernays is now.
Yes.
The mansion and the Crescent Court were in full swing. I mean, Dallas was, I'm trying to remember the name of some of the clubs, but Sambuca was around.
Sambuca, yes.
My girlfriend Holly owned Sambuca. And
Priscilla, Holly Forsyth, yeah. And anyway, so the next morning, though, the phone rings. I'd gotten my own phone in the extra bedroom of Ken Barton's, because at that time, you didn't have cell phones. And he said, you need to get your own phone because I'm on my phone all the time. And I said, okay. So I got my phone. So I had my phone rang, and it was Priscilla. She said, hi, Greg, this is Priscilla Davis. And I said, oh, hi. And she goes, I need you to do something for me. And I go, okay. And she says, I'm taking little Priscilla to school, but on the way, because this is only 3 blocks down from her apartment, is where Ken lived off of Hawthorne and in Holland down there. And she said, I have several rings that I'd like you to take to the Precious Jewel Salon and have them cleaned and see if they'd be interested, anybody, in buying them. She said, take them to Larry Pelzel. I said, okay. And so it was a weird thing. And I said, okay. So she came by and gave me the rings. And that afternoon, she came back over for drinks. And it was just one of those things. All of a sudden, we started to talk every day. But she would come over to Ken's because this was a group of people that old generation also that drank every night. Then we'd go to the Hideaway. Then we go to the John Ellis. Then we go to the mansion on Turtle Creek, or Les Cezanne's over from Vaccaro's, or Brenda Vaccaro.
Life was a 24/7 social event.
It was.
And Lower Greenville.
It was.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't really do Lower Greenville. No, we did Torelli's. And so...
Wasn't there a JR's there too?
That was on the Strip, yeah. JR's and Sue Ellen's. Yes. And so anyway...
And at this point, you're what age and Priscilla's what age?
I'm 25, turning 26, and Priscilla was turning 54. And that was it in the spring of 95, going into the summer of 95. We'd see each other a lot. Oh, I know what it was. Her car. Her son, Jack Jr., had given her an 82 Seville. And she said, the car keeps breaking down. The radiator keeps, I have to put water in the radiator at the mobile station every morning. And, bless her
manual labor.
And so I had an old 84 Oldsmobile for my parents. So I said, just drive this car. So all of a sudden, I had no car. I was giving my car to her. So she'd pick me up, go downtown Neiman's after she'd take little Priscilla to school over at Armstrong over there, And it started to become a normal... Looking back on it, I slowly intertwined my physical being in her hands also. And so by the late summer of 95, we were kind of known as Greg and Priscilla. And so some friends of ours, Beverly Murray Poston. So anyway, I moved in with Priscilla. But the problem was there was only one bedroom. Little Priscilla had the one bedroom. Priscilla had the couch. So I got the floor under that massive coffee table because the TV was up on the console. So now I'm in this 600 square foot apartment, sleeping on the floor, but we were out every evening. And she, it was just fun. And so one night in late November, early December, we're over at Beverly and the carpet layers. And I know what it was. After work at Neiman's, I called Priscilla and I said, don't pick me up. I'm going out for drinks with my friend John. And we go to the Hidden Door, which is still there probably on Lemon Avenue, back there, the gay bar. And I met this guy named Roger Moore. And I remember his name because it's not big. Yeah, it's Roger. And so I went to Roger's house and spent the night with him, and he dropped me off the next morning at the apartments. And Big Priscilla was taking Little Priscilla to school, and that's what happened. Yes, exactly. That's what it was. So that evening, Priscilla picked me up from Neiman's, and we went to Beverly and Danny's for drinks. And Priscilla was in such a mood. And she said, can you believe Greg spent the night over there? How disrespectful. Here we are living together. And I said,
and there's never been any preconceived.
And Beverly said, well, what does that matter? Beverly said, there's her scotch and, big diamond ring. Well, what does that matter, Priscilla? And she goes, well, it's just disrespectful. And I said, well, it was worth it anyway, because he gave a good blowjob. And Priscilla goes, I'll show you a good blowjob. She said, I give the best one in Texas. And she had always said, that she was good on things like that. I mean, that was part of her caricature, her shtick. Yeah. And so that was that. So then we came home and she said, okay, take your jeans off. She said, I'll show you a good blowjob. I said, don't be silly. She said, I said, fine. And
maybe you weren't all queen.
So
there had to be a little bit, but you had to be attracted to her mentally.
After all those years. And so actually what happened was, and then she said, here's what you do to me. Here's how I want you to make love. And I said, okay. And
she coached you through it?
Basically, yeah. And that's how it started. And from then on, she slept on the floor with me. And we had the sleeping bag as our bed. And I thought, okay, this is it. This is my life. And that's okay.
And how many years?
5 and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you wrote in the book that you still assign yourself in a way as gay.
I am gay. I just loved Priscilla.
You just loved Priscilla.
Now, I wasn't all perked that whole time either, as I put in the book too. I worked at Neiman's and we had fitting rooms that were so big we had our own lock on the door and couches. Right. Yeah. So I could, dalliances here and there. Not like a bend over and take it, but yeah,
But, I asked you a little while ago if you truly think that Priscilla was one of the greatest loves of your life.
And she's the only love.
Wow. Which is just a testament to, I think, who she was as a human.
Well, true. But we also needed each other at a certain time.
Right.
We were together for those until the day she died. And I think that makes it, you could say that I'm romanticizing it. Yeah, and I tell you also what the compliment to me that she always says. She says, some people you can trust with your money, some people you can trust with your life. Greg, I trust both. And that was a compliment.
If Kim Gatlin didn't write this in the next damn book.
So, okay, just to segue really fast. Kim is talking about the fact that, is this a cold case? Is this a closed case? Are you active in the current, search for justice on this?
I'm not, but here, getting back to the crime scene and away from this other stuff about it, about our lives and Priscilla's life and all that, the bottom line is this. Stan Farr was murdered in the biggest house in the state of Texas in 1976.
Probably in the South.
Priscilla saw it happen. Another eyewitness, Beverly Bass and Gus, the other two eyewitnesses, said Cullen is on the premises.
Is Beverly still with us?
Mm-hmm. And nobody has ever been prosecuted for that murder.
So take us to Priscilla's final years.
So, as you know, we had a happy life. We drank too much. I was gay. I loved her.
Should have had a bus pass.
Exactly. Everything was, and no, it was really a lovely life, actually. It was very fun. It was fun being her lover.
Do you ever contemplate getting married?
It was fun. Yes. So, what happened was...
Because I would think you would have good insurance.
Exactly. You're very smart, because I'm about to come to that. So, I moved back in. I let the apartment go after a year because Mother and Daddy have paid for it. I tell them that I really am Priscilla's lover. And my father, of course, gets on the phone. My mom, Carol, says, Dan, Greg has something to say. And he gets on the phone upstairs. What? And I said, I'm really Priscilla's lover. I'm moving back in with her. And my dad says, you've alluded us to being gay. What is this about? And I said, I know. I am gay, but I love Priscilla, and I'm moving back in with her. And my mom says on the other end, well, if that's your decision, we can't help you anymore.
I don't even think they make a conversion camp for that.
No.
And I said, that's fine. That's what I've decided. And that was in 98, 97 going into 98. So in the meantime, I'm buying Priscilla everything. My Neiman's card is up to $9,000. I'm called upstairs at Neiman's on the 7th floor. Greg, come up here. We have something to say. And I'm like, well, God, I hadn't smelled like alcohol, for at least a month. So I couldn't understand why they were calling me on the carpet for anything. And so I go up there and they say, well, you understand that your Neiman's bill is almost $10,000. You're 3 months behind. So we're going to take your discount away and we're going to garnish your wages. You're going to pay $100 a week on your card. So I go home and tell Priscilla, and she's like, they do that all the time. Those cheap bastards, they fucking do this all the time. And so I called my parents, and my mom gave me $5,000 to get the bill down.
Sweet mama.
Oh, just an angel. Really, with all that dysfunction, my parents still stood by me.
Right.
So anyway, fast forward to February of 2000. Priscilla was working at this strip club called The Lodge for Dawn Rizzo and her husband. You can look him up. And it was very classy.
She was working how?
She was like the house mom.
Okay.
She was helping the girls. And we were going to Beverly and Danny's and drinking. She was doing that. She would bring a little money in, And it was becoming increasingly difficult for her to stand or sit. And she was like, I just don't know. I said, well, maybe you're not drinking enough. And, she used to say we drink ourselves sober. We were going through 3 half gallons of vodka a week and plus going out. And so, but in our defense, though, when it would get watered down, we'd start over again. So anyway, she was going to see Danny and Richard, her blonde hairdressers, twice a week. And so there was a lady named, what was her name? A Lady Runyon was her last name. Her family had owned the Dallas Morning News years ago. And she used to run around. She had that platinum blonde hair and ran around in that Rolls Royce. And every once in a while, people would mistake her for Priscilla. And she'd say, listen, I'm 10 years older than her. So, no, I'm not the Priscilla. But this lady heard that Priscilla was having pain. And she said, here's $1,500. Go get an MRI. So I called Neiman's upstairs, getting back to your ever so smart point about insurance. And I said, listen, I said, you're letting same-sex domestic partners be on insurance. Will you let Priscilla? You know our situation. They said, we can only, because you're opposite sex, you have to marry. And so Joan Runyon was her name. So Joan Runyon Massey. She gave Priscilla the $1,500, and she had the MRI done. And this was in February of 2000. Right at that time, we get a phone call from American Justice from New York, A&E. And they said, we're coming to town to do a piece on Cullen and Karen. And we need you to talk. We need you to participate. And she said, why? Why do I have to keep talking about this? Why can't Cullen shut up? Why, 25 years later, does Cullen still want to talk, Priscilla would say. She couldn't understand. I mean, she could understand, but not understand it. And so, anyway, she said, yes, I have to do the interview because Cullen's doing the interview. So a friend of ours, Larry Garrett, had a unit at the Warrington where the filming was going to take place. And A&E gave her a $500 gift card to get something pretty to wear, an Escada. We went and got an Escada top. And at the interview, she was complaining about her back. She couldn't stand, she couldn't sit. So I guess then she went and did that. Anyway, it turns out at the end of the episode, Brian Curtis with American Justice says, we have some sad news. Priscilla Davis has been diagnosed with breast cancer. And what had happened was it had been growing for over a year. She couldn't sit still because it was growing. She kept, yes. And it went on. And no matter how much she drank, it didn't, she would always say, well, I'm drinking myself sober. I have another drink. Ugh. So anyway, what happened was they started the radiation in the neck in April of 2000. And that didn't work. So the doctor said, we're going to have to, long story short, the breast cancer had moved to the neck, but then it moved to the femur and blah, blah, blah. And so in August of 2000, they did the mastectomy. And
now, did she still have those breast implants?
So we were laying in bed one night, sober somehow, and she had those big blue eyes. And we looking up. We had that queen size bed she had gotten from years ago, that motorized one that zzz, had that the vibration and all that. And we were laying there, and she said, am I going to die? And I said, no. And she said, will you marry me? And I said, yes. But let's wait until after you can get through this situation. I said, we can have a nice reception over at Les Saisons. And she said, okay. And that was it.
Do you think she was afraid of dying, or she'd come to terms with she'd faced it so many times that not much scared her?
She never said she was scared. And when people would call and say, I'm so sorry, she said, I do not want to take a phone call where someone says they're sorry. She said, it's the way it is.
She didn't want people's pity.
Which,
right.
Yeah.
Understandable.
She didn't have any hair left. She had that blonde wig. Marilyn Schwartz.
Yes.
Writes something very nice. Marilyn Schwartz, actually Albernaze had just opened that summer.
I love Marilyn Schwartz.
And they had a lunch together. You'll have to look up that article. And she says she's still the flashy, beautiful blonde. And that was
Skip
nice of her to
Hollingsworth
say.
was just enthralled with her.
Yeah. I wish some of these people that were enthralled with her had actually had something to say nice about her in the 5 years. I get so tired of people saying, and I've had to fortify myself not to respond if something on Facebook or YouTube or something comes up.
Right.
All these people come out of the woodwork and say, I knew her very well. One person several weeks ago said, I knew her very well and did legal work for her at the end. And it takes all I can do not to engage with. I don't know who you are. I lived with her every day for the last 5.5 years of her life. If you knew her before that time, good for you, but you were not a friend because you weren't there the last 5 years. It takes everything for me not to engage with everybody who wants to say they knew Priscilla Davis. Connection. You know, as Priscilla, one of her famous quotes, there's several things. One of her famous quotes was, remember in the mid-'80s when the Statue of Liberty was crumbling? And we're doing, you're too young to know all this.
Iacocca revived it.
But before that, they were taking donations. Who wants to donate to the Statue of Liberty? And so one of her favorite sayings that Jack Strickland said at the funeral, I'm like the Statue of Liberty. Everybody wants to say they've been to me, but no one wants to pay for the upkeep. Another favorite song of hers, very important. 2. Carly Simon's You're So Vain. She said it would come on and she'd say, there's Cullen, you're so vain, you probably think this song is about you. And then the other song that she did like was Maureen O'Hare's There's Got to Be a Morning After. She said that took her through the trials, from the Positian adventure, There's Got to Be a Morning After. Of course, my favorite song for her is Beautiful Tonight. It talks about watching her with the long blonde hair, then helping me, and then at the end helping me into bed. You're beautiful tonight.
I have to believe that you were the greatest love of her life.
I was. Of course, Willie Nelson's song that I like best also that makes me cry because it's so true is You're Always on My Mind.
Yes.
Because I could have been nicer to her, but I didn't know. At 27, 28, 29, I didn't know she loved me that much because I hadn't been through any life experience. Now that I'm that age, I can look back and say, I get it now.
Well, and I have to think that what you've done post her death has been cathartic for you also.
Cathartic, kind of, not really. There was not much I had to get. Cathartic means you have to get over something. I'm very pragmatic like her. There was nothing really to get over.
Right.
It's more about correcting people's persona.
The history. Right.
That's why I'm still here. And that's why I wrote the book, because shortly after she died, somebody wrote she was broke, despondent, and drunk. And I thought, I am going to correct this. Drunk? Yeah, we drank, so what? But despondent, that leads you to believe that she's depressed and clinically out of... No. We laughed every day.
She was a strong woman.
We laughed every day. Whether it was about... she was a strong woman, but as she said, she's no Joan of Arc. She said that in an interview, and she didn't want to be someone's leader. She didn't want to be thought of as look at me, look what I've been through. No. But the queens loved her because she was their femme fatale. All of a sudden, this beautiful woman is the protagonist against the antagonist of this horrible man, but the queens loved the beauty, the femme fatale. So she became the Dallas equivalent of the National Judy Garland of the 1960s. Right.
What was she buried in?
She was buried in just a white linen top. So she was buried in a white linen top. She looked so beautiful in the casket. The wig, the makeup, that sky blue eyeshadow with the mascara, she looked like it was 1984. And so Margot Rogers, Kenny Rogers' ex-wife, who was a very good friend of ours, yeah, so it's a good story because it encompasses more than just a true crime.
Right.
It actually encompasses the life of a lady that faced such unusual circumstances, from glamour to
At a young age.
At a young age. Her third marriage was at 27 to Cullen Davis. The murders happened when she was 35.
Right.
She came out of all that storm at age 40, moved to Dallas, became the new face of Dallas money and opulence, and then ended up, going broke by 91, moving, and then she had this young gay guy, 30 years younger than her, move in and become her lover for the last 5 years of her life before she died at age 59. She was 59.
That's so young.
So,
well,
that
Greg,
was
we
the
are
story.
so honored that you spent this afternoon with us to tell us the story about
I
Priscilla.
love nothing more than great Texas history.
I know. Thank you for having me. That was very nice of you to be interested, really.
Oh.
Thank you.
And we
But
cheers
I grew
to
up
you,
on this.
Priscilla.
Yes.
Priscilla was a great
Priscilla,
woman.
we're still talking about
Yeah,
you, honey.
and they are.
Yeah.
They are.
With that being
We'll
said,
raise our glass to
Yeah.
say goodnight,
Priscilla.
Priscilla.
Good night, Priscilla.
Good night, Priscilla.